Hi, I'm Lauri Flaquer of Sotar Solutions, and I'm here today on Focus Forward, live with Lauri, with Penny Isaac Nelson, and we are going to talk about motivating and engaging volunteers. Penny, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. Boy, it certainly is hot here in Minnesota today.
Yeah, it's not our usual, that's for sure.
Isn't it great that you don't have employees running around in a park somewhere?
Yeah, that's for sure.
So tell us a little bit, give us a little insight into what superior results your company does.
Well, Lauri, what I like to do is I like to come alongside nonprofits, and I want to help them achieve their mission. And I do that primarily by helping them work on different projects. And we'll talk a lot about what kinds of projects those are and coming up here. And I like to help them do some of their back end sort of support work because a lot of times, you know, nonprofits are stretched pretty thin, and everybody's trying to do many jobs. And so things that I can come alongside them and just take some weight off and kind of be a load lifter for them so they can make some progress on their mission.
Wow, that's great. Well, I'm sure nothing is more important when you're doing a project than enlisting volunteers.
Right.
And getting them engaged and motivated, which I've been in situations of working with volunteers. It's not always that easy.
No.
So give us your insight into how that is done.
Well, Lauri, when you think in terms of a project or something that has a lifespan, so I'm not talking about day-to-day kinds of things. I'm not talking about operations, so to speak. So when you think about a project that comes to an end, it typically has a budget for it, and then it typically has some very specific outcomes, kind of here's what we're aiming at. So when you think of that, and then you think of how you engage volunteers in a project like that, it's really important, first of all, to make sure that the volunteers that are going to be on the team really have a desire to be a part of that, and that you're picking people that have the right skill set. So volunteers love to volunteer. I mean, that's why they're probably connected to the nonprofit. But you really have to be careful that you've got the right skill set on your team when working on a project. And so one of the motivators is really just to like identify the skills that people have. And I like to call it shoulder tapping. So instead of raising your hand and saying, hey, I need help on this, who wants to help? It would be done more like, Lauri, you know, in a private conversation, Lauri, I see some skills in you that I think would be really valuable on this project team. I see administration. I see your gift with just being around people and leading people. And I would really like you to consider being a part of this team. And so that feels really motivational, and it's sincere. It has to be sincere, obviously, rather than kind of an all call, hey, who wants to help?
Well, that makes a lot of sense when you think about it. When you're actually celebrating that person's success and they're celebrating their skill set, I think it's much easier to engage them. So that's a great point. I really like that. I'm going to have to remember to do that. And then what are kind of okay, so you have your main people. How do you get the others? How do you get the manpower? Because you're not going to go to everybody like that, right?
Well, you know, it depends on the size of your team. If most of the projects that I've done with nonprofits really have a team of core leaders of maybe 6 to 8-ish, maybe 10. So you can have an individual conversation, because think of an employer, a paid employee. If you get the wrong person on your team, whether you work at IBM or you work at the nonprofit down the street, that is, it can be a train wreck. And so that's really, really important. So it's worth the time it takes to have an individual conversation to get the right people on the team.
Okay, great. So even though it's more time consuming potentially, it's the better way to go about doing it.
Right, because yep, you have a goal, you have an outcome, and you want to get it done in the best possible way and the most efficient use of resources. And so having the right people is the key to that. Okay,
great advice. Now the next thing is, how do you keep them motivated? Because I know people like to say, okay, I'll do it. Yeah, I'm in it. But then how do you actually get them to produce?
Well, if you have the right people on the team, that's the first piece, really, to keep people motivated. Because if they're sold out to the mission and they're on board with what's going on, then there'll be motivation in itself with that. But I think it's really important also to celebrate along the way. You know, we've set milestones in the project. We've got it. We're trying to hit to a certain point by a certain date. And when we achieve that, then we celebrate. And that could be just a woohoo around the office, or it could be let's go out and do something together. And then a for sure celebration at the end, because these people, they all have more than likely part-time or full-time jobs, families, spouses, children. And so you have to recognize that their time is valuable, and they have to feel like you've honored their time. So you're not just using them for their skill, but they are valuable, and they're just as valuable as somebody who gets a paycheck. And so really important to remember that.
Great advice. Great advice. So how often do you think that having those celebrations, how often is that important?
I think anytime you hit like that next big goal, you hit like we have to be at a certain point in a month, and so when we hit the point, I think we celebrate. And if it's halfway through and we're making great progress and it looks like we're probably going to make it, I think there's an opportunity to celebrate there, and that could look just like more of those individual conversations. It doesn't always have to be a party, so to speak. That's like, man, Lauri, I'm so glad I picked you for this team. You are doing a great job, and here's the stuff that I'm watching you do, and I'm like, I know I made the right decision asking you. I mean, that's a celebration, and it celebrates you, an individual, for the contribution you're making.
Wow, that sounds very valuable, very valuable. Now, when you're in this situation of working with different volunteers, I'm under the assumption that there's different reasons why they volunteer for this project.
Yeah.
There's, you know, different personal gains that they're looking for. How do you deal with having people that come to this and they want to get different things out of the project? How do you go about managing that?
Yeah, well, I think you're right. I think everybody's got their own unique kind of reason. But I think there's also a common reason, and they're all in it because they want to help the organization. They're already a part of it, and they want to see the organization make progress and succeed. So I think there is a common thing, but I think also people sometimes have their other reasons. For example, I've worked on some projects where people that I've asked to come in and be a part of the team, they bring a certain skill set. And sometimes that's those skills, and using those skills and getting this experience is very helpful for them in maybe finding a job. And so that could be an additional motivator. If I'm a young college kid and I'm helping build a website for a nonprofit, that's the project, and I do it, well, now I've got a great thing to put on my resume. I've helped a nonprofit, you know, achieve their success and make progress, and I can say that I built a website, and I can get a letter of recommendation and all of those things that come along with that. So I think there's sort of some side benefits. So it helps to know the people. Those individual conversations are really important to know some of those things.
So when you're having those conversations, it's really also fact-finding.
It is, yep. I think of it, it's really no different than a job interview. This is a job, just because there's not a paycheck. I've been in many of these kinds of volunteers roles, and I've just been called unpaid staff. You know, and it's literally you have the same, you know, rights and responsibilities as a staff person, minus the check. And some people are in a position where that's not a big deal, and they've got the time, and that's fine. But you have that respect and responsibility, just like a staff person would.
Well, that's great. Now, what about accountability? What about if you have someone there on your team and they're not doing what they agreed to, or that maybe they can't do it? Maybe they have a situation that's happened that, you know, extenuating circumstances that they can't fulfill that role. How do you go about managing that?
Well, I think if something comes up and it just gets in the way of their involvement, then you just, you know, they probably would step out of the project, and then you just have to figure out how to replace their skill and the contribution they're making. I think it's a lot harder if a volunteer is underperforming or just not living up to the expectations of what the team needs to be getting done. And so that's where it's really important to make sure if you're a nonprofit and you find someone to come help you do a project, it's really important that that project manager has some really good communication and interpersonal skills, because those are very delicate conversations, but you have to have them. You can't let somebody who's underperforming or steering the team in a totally different direction out of scope of the project. You can't let that happen. I mean, you have a responsibility financially and time-wise to the nonprofit and their board and their donors and all of those kinds of stakeholders. So it's a hard conversation, but you have to have it. And it doesn't mean the person's off the team. It doesn't mean they're staying on the team. I think it depends on how that conversation goes. But you got to lean into it. You can't, put a blinder over your eyes and hope it goes away.
Because it doesn't.
No, it doesn't.
Okay, and then what do you do if you don't have enough volunteers to actually complete the mission? How do you go about managing around that?
Well, I think, boy, that's a good question, because I think nonprofits face that every day, whether it's a project or it's just their day-to-day programming. And it always feels like you never have enough people to do all the work that needs to be done. Nonprofits go about it in many different ways. I think you can do the all-call email, hey, we need help. You can throw it on your website. I work with some churches, and I think churches are very prone to like standing up in front of their group and saying, hey, we need help, and then cross their fingers that somebody shows up. And most of the time, those kinds of Hail Mary asks aren't really very successful. It really is having your people on your team already. They should have their radar up for who else around them has the skills, would be able to make the commitment, and can be part of the team. So it's not just the project manager's job to identify those people. They may have the conversation to hire them, so to speak, but everybody should have their radar up and be watching for leaders, watching for people that could be a great asset to the team.
That's great advice. It's very, very good, very powerful. When you think about it, having the team, building the team is really, I mean, that's a great way to do it, as opposed to one person trying to build the team.
Yep. And chances are, like, when I come into a nonprofit and help with something, I don't know all those individual people. I mean, I rely a lot on the people that are on the inside to give me a pool of people to choose from. I don't just know them. So it's really important then that they are kind of keeping their radar up and watching and being ready to ask someone to be a part of things.
Great. And then how do you keep everybody, all right, you're 3 months into the project, it's like becoming a little bit stale, maybe, it's like more than you thought it was going to be, whatever. How do you keep people still engaged?
Yeah, I think communication is probably the key to that, because people have to know where they stand as a team and individually. If I haven't heard from my project manager for a month, and I'm just off doing my little part, I don't know what's going on. I don't know if what I'm doing matters. I don't know if there's any progress being made, if I feel like I'm just slogging along through my part. So I think communication is huge in that, and I think it's being a great cheerleader. It's those celebrations. That's what keeps people going. Is like, yeah, we're making progress. Yep, we're going to get there. And then because we get there, look what will happen as a result of it. I've been to some conferences where there was a speaker that talked about getting from here to there, and you have to help people understand why here isn't where you want to stay and why there is better. And so, in a project, there's a beginning, and that's where we are now. That's here, and there is at the end, and whether that's in a month or 6 months or whenever. And so helping people kind of capture that vision of there is better.
So you really keep focusing on your vision and your results.
Yep.
That sounds great. So is there anything else you want to tell us about, maybe any other tricks, maybe some question that I haven't asked you about how to get them all running in the right direction?
Well, I think probably every project that I've worked on with a team, whether they're all volunteer or their staff, there's there usually is someone either in the team or close to the team that can be kind of what we call the complainer. You know, things aren't right. How come we have to do that? You know, why can't it be this way? There's a variety. I mean, it could be just about anything, but they're kind of the complainer, and they seem to be really good at pointing out the things that aren't going well or aren't right, and less good at solutions and how can we make those things better. So if that person is part of the team, what I found that works really well is when there's a complainer, then, you know, I think that you'd be a great, it sounds like you really care a lot about this, you've thought a lot about it, and I think you should just, you know, go after it and come up with some possible solutions and things that we could do to actually address this, make it better. And a lot of the times it's like, oh, okay, well, yeah, I guess I do care a lot about it, I could do that. Or it could be, yeah, okay, I'm not going to complain anymore because I don't really want to do anything about it. I just want to complain. You know, so that you have to figure out how to handle that, because, you know, we all run into people that have issues and want to tell us all about it, but provide a solution.
Well, that sounds really, that's, you know, awesome information on and how to deal with that, because you're always wondering, how are you dealing with these people that are the naysayers, that are always, you know, no matter what, you know, you can walk on water, it could be because you couldn't swim, you know, you always have that. But I like the idea of using that as a proactive way for them to be more solution-based. So that's very good.
Yep, and you know, in the teams that I lead, that's one of kind of the upfront, you know, when we lay some ground rules, like we're going to be on time and we're going to respect each other and respect ideas. And one of my rules is that, you know, if you have a complaint or something that you feel is not going well, I don't want to hear about it unless you're going to come with 1 or 2 solutions to make it better. Don't just come dump on me and then I have to figure out how to fix something. You know, if you got the time to think about what's not going well, then you surely must have the time to come up with how could we make it better, right?
That's awesome. So these are part of the ground rules. What other ground rules do you set?
Well, the time, I mean, time is huge, because if you're working with volunteers, they've already got other things in their life. For me, this is what I'm doing. It's not extra for me, but you have to remember that for volunteers, and they're giving up that time. So that's huge. Politics on the team or in the organization, I don't want anything to do with any of that. Whatever that is, you know, if you're working with a really good executive director, I think it's their job to keep that outside. Just let us do the job, let us do the thing we're doing, and that's your job to protect that group from whatever all the other stuff is. And so we don't need to get involved in that. We just don't need to get involved in that, period. It's just not even an option. So that's another big ground rule. Everybody's got politics. Some are little and some are big. So we just don't need to have it in our project.
Awesome. And then you're consistently managing not only the project forward, but also the way people are relating to each other, and that there's not politics, and that people are following the rules. And
right.
It's a big job.
And when volunteers, you know, if you're not getting a paycheck, you can just be done. So what? You know, you could just say, I think I've had enough of this. I'm done. You know, so there's a real fine line to walk when you're working on a project with a team of volunteers. So hopefully you spend the time and the due diligence to pick the right people from the beginning. It makes everything a lot easier. So
picking the right people from the beginning, you know, it makes a lot of sense.
Yep.
Okay, so this has been a great show. Thank you so much. It's been great advice, lots of awesome information, as always. And, you know, it's wonderful to be able to be thinking about how to help people make their own dreams come true, feel great about themselves while improving the lives of others.
Yep. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Some of my favorite projects are with nonprofits. So, yep, exactly what you said.
It's like facilitating feel good.
There you go.
Awesome. So thanks so much, Penny Isaac Nelson, for being here.
Yeah, thank you, Lauri. See you again.
Take care. Bye-bye.